And we have Major General Boe Young coming back to have an important conversation. It's something that we feel passionately about. Love to bring Bo in and have you do that.
Okay.
Oh,
there he is
there he
already.
is.
My gosh. We were going to give you this big, long, incredible introduction. Although we've done that earlier today, but it's always good to see your smiling face. And thanks for, again, being a part of this. You're a very important part, integrable part of the team. So we thank you very much.
Well, thanks. And I'm really excited about
Well, we
Seem to have some technical problems. One thing you might do, General, is we might take your video off. Oh, you've unfrozen. You're good, sir.
am I still frozen or I'm good?
Yep.
No,
I think you're back now. I think you're good to go.
Okay. I'll wave my hand so we'll know if I'm frozen or not. How about France? Can he get on or?
I am
France.
here.
Good to have you, sir. I think we're about to have your image as well. We've got your voice.
Here
There
go.
we are.
There we
All
are.
right.
We will turn it over to the two of you.
Great. Thanks a lot. Hey, France, how you doing?
Great, Bo. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Let me do a quick introduction and then let me just tell everybody who doesn't know what Allied Airlift is that Allied Airlift is a veteran group that came together to help extract American citizens and Afghan allies out of Afghanistan. And France is going to give you a lot more background on that. And what we're going to do today is talk to you not just about the organization, but we're going to kind of get down into the weeds about what's going on, how people get extracted, what the problems and issues are, why it's so hard. And at the center of gravity for Allied Airlift 21, he wouldn't admit to it, but it is France. And he's a veteran entrepreneur that's been on the founding teams of companies that have generated over $600 million of sales and employed 1,200 professionals across very diverse fields, including law, aerospace, defense, government services, and technology. He has 20 years of national security experience in every service in the branch of government. He clerked for Judge Thomas Griffin on the U.S. Circuit or Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. He was appointed and worked in the White House under George W. Bush as an associate White House counsel and special assistant for the president. After that, he actually volunteered to go back into the Army and mobilized in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, where he served as an XO, or executive officer for U.S. Special Forces Company on combat deployment in Southeast Afghanistan. France graduated in the top 1% of his West Point class and graduated magna cum laude from Georgetown University Law School. And he's one of the few people that have passed both Ranger School and the CPA exam, although I guess not in the same year, but we'll catch you some slack on that. France is the executive chairman of the board and a key leader in our nonprofit, Allied Airlift 21. So France, thanks a lot for being here today.
Thanks for that kind introduction, Bo. That's a lot of words to basically say I'm unemployable. So we could have just stopped there.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell everybody, I gave them sort of a quick overview, but what is Allied Airlift 21 and how did it come into existence?
Yeah, Allied Airlift 21. So I think many people on this call, this conference, this Zoom today, have a personal connection to Afghanistan. You know, after 20 years in that country of operations, almost all of us in the national security community have some connection. My connection came from my service with 20th Special Forces Group in Host Province, 2009 to 2010. A number of us have worked on policy issues there. I think all of us were surprised at the speed at which Kabul, fell to Taliban forces and the alarming humanitarian situation on the ground once that happened. And I think anybody with any connection to Afghanistan immediately either had outreach from an Afghan ally from days of past or present asking for help, or leapt forward into the breach and tried to do something because of our connections to that country. And so Allied Airlift 21 was really born out of the efforts of a group of West Pointers, Caleb McDaniel, Tom Lee, and others, who had 3 classmates who were graduates of the U.S. Military Academy and were also Afghans, and found out that those classmates were trapped. And so they organized an effort, like so many other people did, to help these Afghan allies get out of Kabul. And this is, whether you call it the digital Dunkirk or whatever else, it was an amazing moment in kind of American exceptionalism. All these individuals kind of leapt forward and helped, and enabled by technology that didn't exist before, right? The ability to reach out halfway around the world and coordinate someone's rescue, in Afghanistan, and help them, whether it's maneuver to a gate or get onto a bus or get onto a charter aircraft. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people helped in big ways and small ways. And so Allied Airlift was one of those organizations born by the efforts of these 3 initial West Point graduates. After they got their classmates out, they did something that I thought was, and I still believe is pretty remarkable, which is they then asked, who else can we help? And they decided to turn what they learned in these initial evacuations and help others. And that just snowballed. Instead of helping 3, they helped 30, and then 300, and a number of other individuals, including yourself, Bo, heard about those efforts, and myself, and decided to get involved. And the operation grew. And so organically, within a matter of days, we had hundreds of volunteers trying to help hundreds of Afghans get out and get to safety.
Yeah, what was really cool about it is how self-organized it was, and how people came together and said, hey, I'm really good at data analytics, so I can build your website. I'm a lawyer, and I know 3 other immigration lawyers. And the original folks that you talk about standing it up, they were happy to have the help, and there were no egos involved. A group of people said, hey, I think this guy would be great leading the organization. And because I think of the military background, people sort of, fell into what they're really good at. And then it just became self-organized. And literally in 3 days, went from a handful of people to 200 people, all organized as a staff with battle rhythm. And it was, and no ego at all. Nobody said, hey, how come I can't be the boss, or any of that stuff, So, France, I know you're the executive chairman, but you've been hands-on in every step of the way here. Why don't you walk us through the first mission of Allied Airlift 21? This is now pre the fall of Kabul, and I know you have some slides. We can use those if you'd like to use the screen, or just talk through them. Why don't you walk us through how it really works on the ground?
Yeah, are you talking about our first evacuation flight? Or are you talking about, so in the, from the time that Allied Airlift stood up, where our initial focus was on getting people into the gates, and so many people, that was their ticket to freedom. We knew that there was a deadline, that at some point, by the end of August, the US was going to end its military and diplomatic presence on the ground. We didn't suspect that it was going to be sooner than expected. And around August 27th, there was a convoy of vehicles that included Allied Airlift families, as well as other organizations that were trying to get into the gates of HKIA, Hamid Karzai International Airport. And we found out that day was literally going to be the day that the Taliban took over the airport, and the gates were going to be closed. And so this convoy of 7, 8 vehicles and 80 to 100 people were literally circulating around HKIA trying to get in, and frantic phone calls were being made. And unfortunately, because of the security situation, the gates never opened. And then that convoy just grew. It grew organically to about 200 people. And, Afghan allies, people with SIVs, American citizens, people who wanted to get in the gates. And the people involved in that convoy included a couple of different defense contractors, a couple of different nonprofits, including Allied Airlift, some Afghan organizations. And what ended up happening was, as they say, right, necessity is the mother of invention. The decision was made by the group, instead of just telling all these people, so sorry, go home. Let's execute plan B. And plan B was to do an overland convoy to Mazar-e Sharif, because a number of us had flight experience, and the belief was we could chart our flight from Mazar to take this group to safety. And so on the decision, a convoy was organized to take these 200 deserving Afghan allies on the ring road between Kabul and Mazar-e Sharif. We actually didn't know what the security situation exactly was, so we sent out scout vehicles and got all 200 people to safety and settled in. We had hoped to get a flight out right away. That didn't happen, and so we had to scramble and find safe housing for these 200 Afghans. And so kind of overnight, myself and some other folks, the organizers of this effort, which we now call the Afghan Departure Group, ADG, found ourselves responsible for 200 Afghans in the middle of Mazar-e Sharif. We also realized, though, that the road between Kabul and Mez was clear. There wasn't any Taliban presence we could tell, and we realized that situation could change quickly. And so the decision was made to organize a second convoy and to bring more Afghan allies and Americans, LPRs, American citizens, to Mazar. And so we organized the second convoy, brought that vehicle up, and some other folks met us. And so this motley crew grew to about 400 Afghans that we were housing, securing, feeding, and desperately trying to organize a flight. On 29 August, the US ended its military and diplomatic presence there. And so we found ourselves operating in a unique situation, right? Taking care of these 400 Afghans, trying to organize a flight, really without any ability to call upon the State Department or the DoD who had withdrawn at that point. And so it was crowdsourced non-combatant evacuation operations on a pretty major scale, and lots of headaches along the way. At one point the Taliban discovered a safe house. We had to scramble and evacuate it. And, we had all kinds of scares. There was, one evening there was a report of 3 Taliban battalions coming up the road towards Mazar, and we had to make all kinds of very difficult decisions, frankly, that none of us were expecting to have to make. And frankly, we're amazed that, a group of people in their living rooms half a world away were making on the behalf of hundreds of Afghans who turned to us and were looking to us to take them to safety. To kind of cut to the end of it, after 17 days of the safe housing and lots of fighting against the Taliban and US bureaucracies, we managed to get a flight authorized. And it was the first evacuation flight out of Afghanistan after the US ended its military and diplomatic presence. And so on September 17th, 380 passengers, that's 93 households, including 152 children, flew on a flight from Mazar-e Sharif to Qatar and landed there. And I'm happy to say 98% of those people on that flight are now in the United States, having legally immigrated and starting a new life.
And so that flight and all the life support was all privately funded, correct? Is not paid for by the US government.
Correct. And that's one of the remarkable things about this operation, right? And many other operations like it. And there have been many other charter flights to different countries and sponsored by different donors, but it has been a largely privately funded, privately led, privately organized effort to help our Afghan allies.
I know that this mission has some personal connection for you, and I was wondering if you would share what that is with the group.
Yeah, so I will say that this was the single most difficult task, project, I don't even know what you want to call it, I ever took on, and really felt like I had no choice. I just kind of found myself in the middle of this. But I felt very moved to do this, not only because of my service in Afghanistan, but because I myself am a refugee. So 46 years ago, it was me, right? It was my family being evacuated. So I was born in Saigon in 1973. My father was a South Vietnamese Army officer, the equivalent of ANSF. My mother worked for the U.S. Naval Attaché. She would be the equivalent of a civ today. And about a week before Saigon fell, Americans came to my parents and says, it's about time you all leave Saigon. We think that day is today. And so they rushed my family, my sister, my mom, my dad, my dad's mom to Saigon airport. And we flew out on a C-141 Starlifter, arrived in Guam for processing. That would be the equivalent of like a lily pad today. And then from there, flew to Marine Corps base Pendleton and began our new life in the United States. My very first housing in the US was a Marine Corps medium, GP medium tent. And so, Ronald Reagan once said that the amazing thing about America is that anybody can be an American. And so I've always felt extremely blessed to have had the opportunity to grow up here, to be rescued. It's the reason I ended up going to West Point and serving. I feel frankly honored and blessed to have had the opportunity to pay it forward and to help these Afghan families. And when I think about the 93 households in that plane, any one of them was my family 46 years ago.
Yeah. So where do things stand now? We've gotten one plane out, and there are thousands that remain. Can you give us kind of a snapshot of where things stand now?
Yeah, so there's many groups, many operations continue to try to evacuate Afghan allies. The world's kind of divided into just several categories, right? So there are flights. So for those of you who don't know, right, there's what are called lily pads, which are places, US controlled facilities where you can land at, and the Afghans that land there get processed and have a legal pathway of immigration to the United States. And to get into a lily pad, you need State Department approval and approval of the country you're going to. We continue to try to organize and get authorization to flights into lily pads. That's one line of effort. There are flight organizers going to non-lily pad destinations. They're just getting Afghans out and then they're going into these other countries and hopefully finding a way to a durable immigration solution, as they say. There's other groups organizing flights, and they know they're not going to the United States. They're going to countries where there's a follow-on, a visa to a European country or to Brazil or to somewhere else. And then the fourth type of operation is overland. There are groups that are organizing some overland operations. Each one has its kind of pluses and minuses. My understanding is there's been probably around 40 evacuation flights out of Afghanistan. Only a handful that have gone to lily pads. The most have gone to non-lily pad destinations. But efforts continue underway to create what I would describe as a sustainable, scalable solution, right, to the problem of how do we get deserving Afghan allies out.
What are some of the I guess tougher aspects of where it stands right now? When you look at, I'm sure people aren't oversimplifying it, but it's obviously not as easy as just getting on an airplane and leaving. So can you talk through just a couple of the nuances and why it's difficult to move people?
Yeah, I mean, to call the initial evacuation unorganized, right, or not well organized is an understatement. That caught everyone by surprise. Now, whether it should or not, right, is a different discussion for another time. But the reality is that, when Kabul fell, we were not prepared to organize and evacuate the people that we as a nation made a promise to, right? There are 18,000 plus SIV applicants. There are ANSF forces. There are people who are in, they have known active threats, high value individuals. But of the, 53,000 or so folks that were evacuated and came to the United States in the early phases, by and large, the most part, those folks that were evacuated were the folks that just were there, right? That we didn't really do much filtering or prioritizing who got on those initial aircraft. And so a huge number of people that we wanted to get out didn't. And frankly, a number of people that, got out, we later identified as, who are these people? Do they have identification? Do they, are they on a, on a list for concern? And so part of the challenge now is setting up the system that we should have had in the first place, which brings out the right kind of people in the sense of the people that we made a promise to. And second, making sure that we know exactly who's coming out, right? That there is that these are verified, screened individuals. And so getting that part right, is challenging. Second, when you operate a flight, there are three things you need, right? State Department has to approve it. Second, wherever the country you're flying to has to approve it, right? If it's going to a lily pad, it has to be the country the lily pad's in. And third, we are operating within, Taliban Afghanistan now. And so these are not covert operations, right? I'm not cutting a wire in the fence and sneaking people into a plane and flying out under the Taliban's noses. This is being done with the full knowledge and consent of the ruling government of Afghanistan. And so, they are aware, getting all three things to line up: the US, the arriving country, and I jokingly call it Taliban TSA, but getting all those three things to line up to go into a lily pad, right, is extremely challenging. But it is also the only way to have a legal pathway of immigration to the US, which is what these Afghan allies deserve.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that makes Allied Airlift different is it's sort of playing the long game, if you will. So the screening of cases is extraordinarily rigorous. You have to have documentation that you are either an American citizen or an LPR, or you are sponsored personally by somebody who personally knows of your work. And then there's a whole case management infrastructure for Allied Airlift that looks at this documentation, vouches for it, and so that when people get on a plane or we submit a manifest to the State Department for its approval, there's a high degree of confidence that those people are who they say they are. They're deserving of being evacuated, and so I think we're hoping that that process and that goodwill is, as you said before, long-term, enduring, and ultimately scalable for when more resources come to bear, assuming more resources come to bear.
Yeah, I joke, Bo, it's not planes that saves lives, it's paperwork, right? So there are many ways to get somebody out of Afghanistan, but there's really only one way to get somebody out of Afghanistan to a legal pathway where they can resettle, which is through a lily pad, which means you need the State Department, the arriving country, and the Taliban to approve, which means you need to be extraordinarily rigorous in your paper, verification and validation. The alternative is to have a situation where the wrong people get off the plane, or people you didn't identify get off planes, and when they get off the other end, right, you now have frankly a humanitarian and diplomatic situation that has to be resolved, and those things have a dramatic long-term effect.
Yeah. So how much does it cost to charter a private aircraft out of Mazar-i-Sharif to a lily pad? And our organization and others are helping with the life support, the food, the hotel, the safe houses. What's all that cost all in?
Yeah, to do a flight. So understand, right? To do a flight from Afghanistan, part of the challenge is it's hard to get insurance, right? You're talking about Afghanistan, so you're limited in the carriers you can use. When you charter a flight, that's the bulk of the cost. I don't want to go into details about sources and methods, but to do what we call a great ground game, right, which is the safe housing, securing, feeding, screening, verification of these individuals on the ground there. Think about housing a small town, right? 400 people in advance of a flight and executing it to perfection in terms of making sure who's getting on and who's getting off. That cost is easily above $900,000 a flight.
Yeah. So at some point, the U.S. government may start to contribute to that or even pay for it. But at this point, it's a privately run operation. And every little bit counts. So there's probably only a handful of people out there that could buy an airplane. But if you're interested in giving, you can go to the Allied Airlift 21 website. It's been posted in the chat, and every little bit helps sustain life support, meals for a week, winter clothing, until, realistically, we're probably weeks or months away from some sort of constant rhythm, where a plane is leaving every week or every 3 days or whatever, that it's government funded. So if folks are interested in helping, that's certainly one way they could do it.
Yeah.
Fran-
Yeah, I would just say,
anyway.
yeah, I would echo that and say, I've served in government, I've served in the military, I've worked on nonprofit boards. I've never been involved in something where I had such a direct impact on people's lives. And there's a shining moment in history here where those of us in the United States can reach out and literally grab the hand of somebody in Afghanistan and help them, bring them to the US and start a new life. And as somebody who was that person 46 years ago, this is a chance to make a difference that you may never have again. And so, we appreciate everyone's support, whether it's as a volunteer or as a donor, or just simply spreading the word about what we do. It's a cause that is deeply personal for many of us. And if anybody has any questions, wants to reach out, happy to make myself available.
Okay, great. Thanks, France. Thanks for coming on and sharing the story. Thanks for everybody for listening and any support you can provide. And David, we'll pass it back to you guys.
Thank you very much, General Young, and certainly we thank France. That was really fascinating to listen to all that, was it not?
So, General, you guys are doing really important
Yep.
work. You're actually saving lives. Our own people that are there still there deserve that, and the allies who risk their lives every day and are still under threat, we owe them. They deserve to be able to come here. They're true asylum seekers, and I commend you and all of your friends. You guys are doing really important work.
Well, thanks. It's my role is kind of mixed on it. I'm on the board, but I'm also a case manager out of kind of necessity. And the first group that I was able to get out, I I cried like a baby. So
Well said.
I don't
Well,
mind saying that. So
yeah, should be proud of that.
I'm going to turn it back over to you guys. And anyway, thanks for giving us the time to discuss this.
No. Thank you. Thank you. So
So
the day continues. Are you pleased so far with what's taken place?
it's an amazing day when you can bring people together like that, and the charity that we showcased before, et cetera, get the word out a little bit to, I guess at one point we had 500 something people simultaneously watching. This is recorded. It's going to be out on YouTube and et cetera. All of our things are, so people can come see that. I feel like we're doing something that matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, totally agree.